Yep. Still can't finish Legacy Wave 3, but I can get Evolution figures no problem. Not Tarn though, that would be way too cool. But first, please like and subscribe. I needs it! Like a lot of the figures recently, I'm gonna have a fair amount bad to say about this thing. But unlike those other recent releases, it's not the QC that's failing it. It's not phoned in, it's not too small or too expensive for what it is. It's just an awful, terrible, bad idea that Hasbro executed to the best of their ability. And it deserves credit for that. This is something that should not have been attempted the way it was. But at the very least, they put their whole ass into it. And I can't hate it for that reason. It can even look really cool at times. And to be clear, I'm not talking about the fact that Hasbro wanted to do a jet at a deluxe scale and price point. I'm talking about the way they went around achieving that. This is a robot that has an entire plane on its back, and a plane that has an entire robot on its underside. And the result is a figure that feels like this part of it is a non-transforming robot, and this part of it is a jet that was glued onto its spine. And here's the thing, it doesn't feel like that, because that's exactly what this is. This is the Ursi of Jetformers. You can drive out this single pin and have a completely separate jet and robot. This is what I mean when I say that this thing is a bad idea. It's like we've regressed more than a decade in terms of transformation design, basically to wind back up at Classics Silverbolt. And this really didn't have to be this way. Titan's Return Blitzwing showed us that you can get a cockpit to shrink to half scale like it's magic. That could have been used here, and I mean, honestly, when the underside of the jet is just the robot curled into a ball, would anyone really have cared if the underside of the cockpit was hollow? No one cared on G-Axis. You get all that to fold into itself, and then have that tuck into the torso of the robot mode. The head didn't need to be mounted on the spine. It very easily could have been mounted to the chest plate, so the back could have been left open. It'd give you more ability to pose the wings, and it wouldn't look like he's always in the middle of dropping a giant deuce from the front. This doesn't have to be the way it is, and it strikes me as having been designed by someone with a complete lack of imagination. This also strikes me as a Siege figure because holy hell, does a lot of this thing feel really familiar. To the point where I'm half convinced that these are just Spinister's arms. And that would make sense considering the whole fan vote that happened. The way that almost everything came out after, I wouldn't be surprised if it turned out that everything in the contest was partway through development, and it was run just as a way to make fans feel like they were involved. Anyways, with that all out of the way, the figure looks pretty cool. Needlenose is one of those cons who doesn't necessarily look all that much like he belongs to his faction. Probably why IDW spent so much time questioning if he could be redeemed. But he still has a cool and memorable design, almost like if a Space Knight could be mass-produced. I will say that in robot mode, I'm already kind of fed up with the alt mode, since that thing seems to have inhaled the entire paint budget. What does this guy even get? He's got his knees, his shins, the Deceptive badge, and his faceplate. Literally everything else is bare plastic. And that's not something that would usually bug me, but in this instance, the chest vents look so plain. They really needed to move some of the silver found on the alt mode into here to punch these up. And this definitely could have used anything on the wrists. Get this boy some sweatbands. I love the metallic blue they used on his shins, as I always so eloquently put it, anything good. And I want that for his chest. This guy feels pretty gappy, not from the front unless you count the chest holes that are giving me some trypophobia, but the legs from behind have huge holes in them that would normally mean they fold in on themselves in the transformation. And that's not quite, what they actually do is in fact so stupid I had to look at the directions, because my brain can't work that badly. But that's for later. Point being, legs ugly. But the wrists are also just so pointlessly hollow. There was no reason for this considering how simple most of what this figure does is. That does not sound like a proper sentence, but I think it is. I do have to hand this thing a fair amount of credit though. The QC is fantastic here. All the joint tolerances are excellent. This is one of the most pleasant to handle figures I've dealt with in months. According to some people, Hasbro just fired their quality control manager. And if this is what figures are like without him, goddamn did that guy suck. It's like he was from Bizarro World. Me Bizarro love tight joints. Love tight joints so hard. Give figure shake. Rattling mean tight joints and sad children. Maybe that's why they hired him too. Me Bizarro very qualified for position at company. Me Bizarro know what QC and customer satisfaction is. It would also explain how they hired their managers for Wizards of the Coast. The head is super cool. They really managed to get it looking like a Crusader, which makes total sense because we like to imagine them as ass kickers for the Lord. But if you really think about it, the Crusaders were the villains of that whole situation. They were the guys showing up to someone else's country, kicking in the front door and saying, "Hey, I think your house is sacred. Get out so I can pray in peace." I don't know how they made it seem so inherently evil though. The eyes look so angry, but I don't think they're shaped much differently than normal. The plastic is bleeding through the yellow pretty readily, but that does make it look like he actually has face vents, so that's a bit serendipitous. It's a great head for a bad guy, even if he gets like no rolls ever. So it's actually a really good looking robot mode, but I'm tempted to just rip the cockpit off and throw it away, because it just hanging down like some kind of robo-furry bullshit pisses me off. And honestly, the only thing making me keep this around is using it like a tripod, because the jet mode isn't really worth it. QC is well handled and the figure feels good. Plus, it has a solid aesthetic, if you don't count the backpack, and the accessories aren't fucking up anything like Point Blanks did. The fin comes off the back. Don't ask, I don't know why. And then you got his little Target Master buddies. Each of these are technically less complicated than the trash that came with that relentless disappointment Point Blank, only having the back panels flip up, as opposed to folding in half as well. But they're better painted, they look cooler, and somehow less like a brick, and their gun modes are more believable too, not looking like a pathetically endowed man. So these, despite their goofy nature as tiny dudes, the bigger guy fires, are actually a decent pair of accessories. I don't know that I would choose to have something like this over normal guns if I had the option, but there is no denying the quality and effort that was put into these. Posability is actually better than normal here, but it could have been top tier were it not for the trash pack he's lugging around on his ass. Head is above average with some side to side, and you can fake it for a small amount extra down. Shoulders pull like an 89. Maximum elbows. Wrist swiv. I'm only noticing this now, but he has an insanely tight waist that's really impeded by the backpack. It is so bad that it might as well not be here. I'd give up this joint altogether to fix the backpack in a heartbeat. Hips are unimpeded forward and super unimpeded out to the side, but they have almost no back thanks to the awful jet mode folded between his butt cheeks. Extreme knees and feet with a great pivot and a huge toe down. So if this could just get rid of the unbearable backpack, this thing would have been awesome in the posing. I mean, he's already solidly above the average with great knees and elbows, but if the ass weren't clogged up with kibble, the hips would be excellent too, and the waist wouldn't have to be entirely discounted. Transformation ain't good. Welcome back to Combiner Wars, ladies and gentlemen. Honestly, that might be an insult to Combiner Wars. Most core figures have a more complicated conversion when compared to this crap. It's not painful or tedious or difficult or clashy, it's just too simple. It takes no effort. How the arms and legs work is so stupid that it actually threw me the first time I ran through this though. But this isn't a miserable experience, it's just a boring one. And this is what I mean when I say that it was a bad idea executed well. The core concept is worthless. However, in the execution, they polished this turd to a fine sheen. And it does make it more than the sum of its sharts. However, the biggest negative of this whole equation probably comes now, with this positively hideous jet mode. It's so squat and thick and soft looking. Even when looking only from the top where you can't see the underside at all, this doesn't look like something that could actually fly. The wings are just so small and inflexible, and the cockpit with the way the paint roughly meets it feels lower quality than the rest of the figure does. To be clear, the paint in this mode, except for the fuzziness there, is immaculate, and it looks so nice and shiny. Plus, even though this whole section is blue plastic, they managed to color match the gray paint exceptionally well. That aspect is excellent, and yet another example of where it is the execution of the figure giving it all of its value, because the bones of this figure are brittle, malnourished, and weak. You can attach the weapon masters to a few spots on the jet mode, though I'm not quite sure why they have these ones along the sides of the legs, considering the guns have an uneven amount of depth. And I seriously have to question, no landing gear. Really, on this, no landing gear. I know this doesn't need it, and I know it wouldn't make it a better figure, but this is the first time that I've really looked at this thing and been like, well, that's lazy. As there's really no reason to not include it. So ultimately, I'd say that this is a figure you won't have strong feelings about. It could have been way worse than it is because they at least tried. I don't know if this is just an old design or if the designer just lacked creativity of any variety, but everyone else in the pipeline seems to be committed to making this the best it could be. And the result is actually a figure that's probably excellent for little kids. It looks cool, it poses well, the QC is great, it feels like it's probably pretty durable, a child won't have trouble with the transformation, and there's not a lot of thin parts to break off on the alt mode because of the way it's all set up. Honestly, if you just glue down that tail fin so the kid can't lose it, this might be a wonderful gift to give a younger family member. It's almost tailor-made for those sensibilities. However, if you're an adult looking for a little complexity in your figures, you may find this a little on the duller side. You can appreciate it for the cool look of the robot mode and the solid posability, but I don't see you getting engaged with the transformation, and maybe you have more tolerance for that jet mode than me, but I guarantee you won't be enthused by that freezer block it's riding on top of. Not worth avoiding, not worth hunting, but also not trying to rip you off at all, which is commendable. And it's a great idea for a gift, so I fully recommend it for those purposes. And that's not half what I have to say, but it's enough what I have to say. And I know, you know, what everyone else tells you to do at the end of these videos. So if you liked what you saw here, please do that. And if you'd like to take it a step further, then please share this video with any friend you think may be interested. I hope you all enjoyed listening to me waste your time.